on the mic. Manny, Laura, what's going on, man?
Dude, just happy to be here, man. I catch as many shows as I can. Big fan of Jake behind the scenes. Big fan of you, man. Congratulations. I told you on Twitter on your wedding stuff. I saw that.
Thank you.
And just happy to be here. I work with Lafayette all the time on radio, doing the Osmo radio show. So me and him keep in touch, but glad to finally be on with you and then hopefully some of the other guys sooner or later. So a lot of fun, man.
Dude, yeah. And honestly, for those of you who don't know Manny, he's on the Sirius XM radio with Laffy on the weekends. And he also does some dope shows on Twitch with Fantasy Cruncher. Manny, how long have you been doing that for?
Dude, we have a year and a half. We're going on 2 years now on Twitch. It's funny because it started out as one of those troll gigs, right? I saw someone, offer a coaching session for $300, 1 hour. I was looking at him like, really, man? Who's gonna pay $300? So it started out like, you know what? I'll do it for free. And I posted on Twitter. We are now almost 2 years later, still doing the same thing. So an accident or a little funny, little troll thing on Twitter turned out to be something pretty nice. And I don't know, it's been a lot of fun.
That's incredible. No, I check the show out from time to time. I love it. Manny does a great job interacting with everyone. So if you ever get a chance, definitely check him out. Today's show, what we're going to do, because we're not going to be doing the screen share, we're going to go over some basic questions for the Fantasy Cruncher, kind of cover some different aspects of it. And then we're going to go into the slate, break some things down, kind of just pick Manny's head, go over some little game scenarios. But before we do, let's go over some little news and injuries real quick. I don't know how you feel about this, but Antonio Brown, he's not on the main slate, but, I don't know what's going on, man. He's gonna be suspended. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, he's a head case, man. I mean, ever since the whole helmet thing, now he's getting into it with the management. This guy's a disaster, man. So the Raiders, I didn't think had a chance to win, period, right? I think, they're a little bit more on the map because they got Antonio Brown. Josh Jacobs is a thing, I guess, but how will rookies play out after we saw Montgomery yesterday, right? So that's a whole nother topic. But I don't know. Does that open Tyrell Williams for something come Sunday or Monday or whenever? Week 2, maybe when he's on the slate. I don't know. I have no idea, but I don't know, man. Antonio Brown, I think I've said this before. He just like plagues every team, right? The whole diva thing, the coming to camp on a hot air balloon or a helicopter. Like, why? Why? Why the whole show, dude? Just get out there, be with your teammates, and play football. Can't do that now. Now this is probably the worst team in the league. I'm a Dolphins fan. I like to think we are going to go 0-16. I want to be 0-16 because I want some draft picks, but I don't know. Now with no Antonio Brown, the Raiders can make a run for it. It's pretty close for last place now. It's funny.
No, you guys are tanking how you're supposed to tank. You're getting rid of everyone. You guys are pre-planning this. So I'm a Jets fan, so we got a little rivalry thing going on there.
As long as Brady leaves eventually, right? I think we're okay.
Man, well, guys, before we get into it, we do have our sponsor, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points simply by signing up through us at osmo.com. It's real simple, guys. All you need to do is just head over to osmo.com, click on the Spotlight Hitters article if you can find it. And also from there, you can click on the Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports link, use the sign-up code OSMO. You don't want to miss because this week, I don't know if you're playing in it, Manny, but Yahoo's Week NFL 1 contest, including the $1 Million Baller, featuring a $100K first place prize payout and zero management fee. But everything we pay into the contest comes back to the players. There's something for everyone every week, including the $25K guaranteed. It's only $1K to enter and pays $4K to first. There's no multimedia entry, 10 entry max. But there's no better place to play than NFL this season than Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Are you going to get into that $1 Million Baller?
Yeah, they just unbanned Florida. I'm a Florida guy, so they just unbanned Florida right before this. So yeah, man, I'll be able to get in. Feels like there's millionaires everywhere, but you're right. I think this might be one of the better ones. Definitely doesn't compare to the rake we're getting raked on DK or wherever. But yeah, Yahoo has a good one. I'm finally unbanned, so it'll be my first time playing on Yahoo. Yeah, pretty cool.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I used to live in Florida, so I kind of know that feeling. Now being on the West Coast, I actually have the luxury of playing with Yahoo. So beautiful thing. All right, let's talk Fantasy Cruncher, Manny. You definitely done some, and there's a lot of people probably in here that are either new to Fantasy Cruncher, still trying to figure it out. What's the most effective way of using it? Things of that nature. If you're a first-time user, you're someone who's getting acclimated to Fantasy Cruncher, what would you kind of say is the basic things that they need to know first before going in depth and using Fantasy Cruncher?
Yeah. So to just so everyone could understand, they're here for a reason, right? They started using an optimizer, or heard of the idea of an optimizer because some of the top players are using optimizers to do things more efficiently, right? So if you started out as technically a casual, where you were, I don't know, at the bar on your phone on an app making your lineups, sorry, you really liked it and you want to play a little more. Then you heard of guys like Osama and be like, oh man, wife, dude, this guy makes millions playing or whatever, like I want to be like him. He then says he uses Fantasy Cruncher, and now you're trying to use FC, right? So my thing is, understand kind of why you're here in the first place. Understand that there's a learning curve. It's not that this is, from night and day, I'm going to learn 2 little tips and I'm going to be a stud at Fantasy Cruncher, right? It's a process, just like anything in life is. And have some patience. Have some patience. This is a product that has been in the works for years. We keep updating it daily. Every single day we tweak things. We add things to make it easier for the user. We add things that could give users an edge. And I don't know, if some of the top players are using it, it's for a reason, right? There's tons of optimizers out there, but we really pour our heart and soul into this. And some of the features we've brought out lately is because we hear what the users have to say, what they would like to see in a product, and me and my partner implement it. So we are here going every single day. Understand why you're doing this. Understand why FC is crucial to you, and then start learning how to use it little by little.
Yeah, I honestly, that is great advice, because when you first enter the Fantasy Cruncher world and you're using the software, right, I think the first thing, especially for me when I was introduced to it, is, wow, this is a lot of numbers, a lot of information. And you don't know what to do. You don't know how to react to all of it. And, you kind of get overwhelmed. And so I think patience is definitely probably the best advice someone can get when first using Fantasy Cruncher. And more importantly is, you don't need to know everything right away.
Correct.
I think, taking your time, understanding the different functionalities of Fantasy Cruncher will allow you to get better over time. And that's okay, because this is not just like an overnight skill that you learn. I mean, it takes a while to really incorporate and learn, but you get better each day that you use it. I think it's good to point out when someone is using Fantasy Cruncher, and we talk about stacking and we talk about stack correlations. When it comes to stack correlations and grouping per se, what tools do you focus on the most to kind of get those lineups generated that you're looking for as far as stacking?
Yeah, so it's typical in the industry to see optimizers just have a stack QB with 1 or 2 or whatever of wide receiver, running back, or tight end, right? That's like the default way of stacking, I'd say, in every optimizer. Now, since we incorporated groups, I think people have adopted that mentality and now want to learn how to use groups. But groups is it gives you the ability to customize your stacks and have full control over what you want to do. But it's also really easy to make mistakes in groups. There's also some of the lazy people that get up on Sunday 30 minutes before lock, press a couple stack buttons, and think the stacks are going to be great. But that way, you technically have stacks, but the way an optimizer works, it's going to be really tough for you to get like really good stacks and play stacks that will be effective in tournaments. Say like you have a random quarterback with his third string wide receiver, like that doesn't really make much sense over the course of a season. So using groups is what I'd say to focus on the most. The problem is you really have to practice and practice and practice how to make groups, how to make correct groups. You can still mess up a ton, and any little mistake, I'd say, can lose you still a lot of money, right? I feel people have the idea of, well, I'm going to use an optimizer. I'm going to make, 50 lineups, and I'm going to win. I mean, it's not as easy as just pressing a button. You could very well lose as much, right? And I think people forget about that. So it's learning how to use it correctly, learning the ins and outs of what a group is, what a stack is, and then how to create them effectively, efficiently, and the right way, because quite frankly, a lot of people are doing it the wrong way. So hopefully I can answer some of those questions. Hopefully I could give people insight on how I create the stacks, how I create the groups, and hopefully help them already now in week 1.
Yeah, no. And that goes into kind of what I wanted to dig deeper in is the differentiation of team stacks in the advanced options and groups. Now, you said groups is more advanced type of approach when using Fantasy Cruncher. Would you say that team stacks and building stacks is first kind of the approach to use rather than grouping to kind of get used to Fantasy Cruncher to play with it?
Yeah, so I think I'd rather do it through position stacks. So if people are following along on FC right now and they click the advanced options, we have a series of tabs, right? There's 5 tabs, but the ones we'll focus on now for the sake of this discussion is the position stacks tab and then the team stacks tab. So team stacks, I think people are more familiar because we're coming off of MLB season, right? And this is kind of where you do your MLB stacks, to where you'll set 2 different types of stacks, whether that's 5 threes, 5 twos, 4 fours, 4, whatever it is. You would highlight whichever teams you want, kind of set your stack cap per se, and then let the optimizer run, really. For NFL, because you're dealing with, certain players, certain teams, certain stacks, it's not always through this tab. And I'd argue that, maybe the position stacks tab is a little bit easier just to get familiar on what a stack is and how you're building them. So again, I mentioned just a little bit ago, the default way of doing this, if you go to the position stacks tab, and how we programmed it or how we made it on FC is everything reads as a sentence, right? So if people are looking at this for the first time, my tip would be read everything you see in Fantasy Cruncher as a sentence and just fill in the blanks, right? So if you wanted to create a stack right now, the sentence would read stack, and it gives you a drop-down menu. So you'd pick QB. Stack your QB with at least, at most, or exactly whatever, 2. I usually set 2. So set that number to 2 with at least 2 of, could be wide receiver, tight end, running back, usually what I said in this column. And then positions from the same team. You could do it opposing team, same game, whatever, but I choose same team. And then once you have the sentence filled out, you would click on the bottom, the add stacking rule. And then that would create a rule to where any lineup you create has to follow that rule, right? So, and then if you were to make some lineups, you'll see that every single lineup you make has at least 2 wide receivers or tight ends or running backs from the same team paired with your quarterback every time. Essentially, you're making a 3-man team stack at that point. So that would be the basics of doing it. I think once you see all the lineups it creates, you think it's okay. There's some stacks, but some stacks really don't make sense. Like I told you, sometimes it'll use, I don't know, maybe dual running backs. For the Patriots example, I don't know, maybe Sonny Michel and James White in the same lineup. That doesn't really make sense. They're negatively correlated. So you do have the stacks. Just if you want more control, I'd say, again, put a little more, just a tiny bit more time and learn the groups feature. It gives you more control and lets you, doesn't let that happen, actually. So you will never get James White and Sonny Michel if you don't want to. So I'd say play around with position stacks first, move to groups later, if that was a question.
No, that was, I love the way you put that, because, and you mentioned something great. A lot of people are still in the MLB mindset. Right. So I think when they're stacking or using the stacking feature, they're still using it as if it's MLB, which I think is causing negative correlations like you just mentioned. And also it's not very optimal. And so people are probably seeing things that don't make sense. And that's exactly why. When it comes to exposure, obviously we get ownership projections, especially at Osmo.com. And we just got another ownership projection update this morning. How do you approach adjusting exposure when ownership changes, especially when there's high fluctuations to what you've already seen?
Yeah, so NFL is at least for me, and this might depend on the player, right? It might depend on what type of player. If you like taking more risk, if you like being a little more safe, depends on your play style. But ownership projection, I think, is huge for DFS in general, obviously, right? For obvious reasons. But in NFL, it's kind of weird because when you get to the level of team stacks, essentially what you want in a lineup is a lineup that's unique to the field, or at least as unique as it can be without it being a bad lineup, right? Because I can make really unique lineups. They're just going to be terrible. Yeah. But I want to make good, unique lineups. So in an NFL, because you're using team stacks, believe it or not everyone in NFL uses stacks to begin with, which to me is mind-blowing. I don't know why you'd have a quarterback without his receiver. It's only obvious. But anyway, there's still a portion of the tournament that doesn't do that. And then to go even further, if you run game stacks like I do, I don't just run team stacks. Game stacks are used even less than, say just regular team stacks. So for me, I'm already extremely unique in my builds the way I do it, right? Because I run game stacks. And then it only takes really minimal effort for me to be extremely different from the field, which I think in all these large field tournaments, the Millie has like 300,000 entries. I think you're different enough without being quote unquote stupid, right? To where you have good lineups, you're still unique, and you can get up there. So for me, it's more the game stacks kind of take care of that. But if you're running regular team stacks, I think ownership is imperative. I think Maybe just a flat out minimum or maximum ownership threshold is maybe the wrong way to do it. But having being aware that there is ownership available to all the Osmo users, use it, because it's very, very effective. And don't just set a minimum max. Just try to have a good combination of chalky with contrarian players. One or two contrarian players can do the trick. You don't have to have a full lineup of 1%ers, right? You can do it the right way. I think don't overdo the ownership, because that's when I think people get in trouble.
So this brings me to my next question. Yesterday, Dalvin Cook obviously is a very chalky play this week. He was projected to be 23% owned yesterday. His ownership jumped up another 14% this morning, projected to be 37% on DraftKings, 6,000. That type of jump, does that change your game plan whatsoever, especially when it comes to running lineups in Fantasy Cruncher?
Yeah, for sure. And then I've already ran. So this morning before the show, because I knew we were going to talk about the slate, I was forced to run my first iteration of my lineups, right? So I don't do this till like Sunday morning. I wait till the very end to start making my first lineups of the week. But I made them for the show, and I did look at that, and I wouldn't say it's surprising. I think it's again. So I make lineups two ways to kind of see this, and then I test it with the projections that I do get from Osmo as well. So I do use Osmo ownership projections for my personal play, and I saw Dalvin Cook, and I'm like, man, that's interesting. So I do two things. I make lineups the way a casual would make lineups. So all I do is I stack my quarterback with one receiver or maybe two receivers, and that's it. I don't run any game stacks. I don't run anything insane, and I just run all the lineups. Predictably so, Dalvin Cook came up a bajillion %, right? He looks to be like the play at running back, right? He is a perfect price tag. I love the matchup. I love absolutely everything about it. Any check mark you want to have for Dalvin Cook, they're all there. So then I make lineups the way I want to make them, and I put my game stacks in. I do my team stacks, whatever. And all of a sudden, Dalvin Cook isn't as high for me as he will be for the rest of the field. So a couple things. I think the ownership on Dalvin is correct. I also think you should be a little bit lower on Dalvin Cook, is my opinion. I don't know. And if you're running game stacks, I really don't know how much. I actually don't even think Dalvin Cook should be your highest owned running back, to be honest, if you're in the game stacks territory. If you're not, then yeah, I think Dalvin is the right play. If you're playing cash, I think he's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I agree with pivoting from Dalvin Cook, especially if the ownership is that high. I don't believe that there should be that much ownership for myself to match the field on that. If anything, I would want to pivot to maybe like a Chris Carson or a Fournette, who are in the same price range, who do have good matchups, and who are two running backs that I feel are going to be getting a chunk of the carries, especially with Fournette. There's not really much of a backfield there now. So Fournette seems to be in line to really get that heavy load that we kind of want to see out of him. When it comes to, though, something like Dalvin Cook, and let's just say you have you're someone who is beginning to play, and you're doing the max stack, you're doing 150 in the Millie Maker, and you have you had 20 or 30% Dalvin Cook, and now let's just say Saturday he goes up to 50%. In that type of situation, when you pull back and you're pivoting, does that change the game stacks, or does that change the whole lineup build, or are you just swapping out one player?
Yeah, 100% it does, because I feel some, and I'm gonna even address some that might already created their lineups, already created their groups. If they're advanced enough and they created their groups, they already have their Minnesota group. And it's funny because in the chat I'm in, a bunch of people have asked already, I have a 70% Dalvin Cook. What do I do with Dalvin Cook? Why is Dalvin Cook everywhere? I know the answer. It's just hard for me to give it to everyone. So I'll give the answer here for everyone. My answer and how I'm combating this is, if you made groups, and I know from at least my audience, they're probably laughing right now. They're cracking up. If you created a Minnesota group, you added Dalvin Cook because something in your brain told you that Dalvin Cook catches so many passes that him and Kirk Cousins are the highest correlated people on their team, or players on their team. I honestly don't think so. So if you were to run this experiment and take out Dalvin Cook from your group, and in every Kirk Cousins lineup, you don't have Dalvin Cook, you can pair him with, I don't know, Thielen or Diggs or whoever you want. You don't have Dalvin Cook, you won't get as much Dalvin Cook as you're getting if you leave Dalvin Cook in. So I think for me, it's try both ways, right? Leave Dalvin Cook in some stacks, take out Dalvin Cook in some stacks, see where he lands, use him as a filler only. If you're using Kirk Cousins, try not to use Dalvin Cook and then use Dalvin Cook and see what the disparity is, not just in Cook's ownership in your lineups, but then also how much you use Kirk Cousins. And you'll see that it's almost night and day, right? You're going to use, if you use a lot more Cook, you're going to use a lot more Cousins, maybe a lot more Diggs, a lot more Thielen. If you don't use Cook, all those guys come down significantly, right? To where I've talked about if you're getting 70, 80, 90% of someone, something is wrong, some setting is wrong in FC for you. I think Dalvin Cook might be a problem for a lot of people using FC and optimizers in general if you're making a ton of lineups. For me, if I see him jump to 50, I wouldn't bump down his projection, but I'd probably do everything to use him a little less than where I have him now. Yeah.
And if he jumps to 50, Alex Osimo Baker himself, he kind of mentions always in MLB references the anti-optimizer play. Right. So in this scenario, if Thielen and Diggs ownership goes down and Dalvin Cook is still on the rise, do you switch and pivot to maybe focusing on the passing game more because it'll be a little bit more contrarian rather than focusing solely on the running game? Because if you have 70% Dalvin Cook and Atlanta shuts down the running game and they're only passing, you have now just really jeopardized yourself from cashing at all.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I think it's creating leverage, right? If a lot of people are going to be on Dalvin Cook, hopefully Kirk Cousins throws the touchdowns to Diggs, Thielen, Rudolph, whoever you want, and you get leverage that way. But to see, and I think this is the worst feeling in DFS period, is you see Dalvin Cook and hypothetically, let's say he gets to 50. It's like, man, he's 50, dude, but it's Dalvin Cook. Honestly, if he didn't run that 80-yarder in preseason, is he really that chalk? Is he really that? It was one run, dude. It was in preseason, right? So, I mean, the guy's good. Don't get me wrong. He's a great player. But come on, eventually you got to just sit down, look at it from a third-person point of view, and just, all right, he ran an 80-yarder. Why is he 30, 40% owned? To me, it's if you want to go against that, especially in large field tournaments, you have to take risks like this. You can't just think you're going to go with 30 or 40% of the field at such a prominent position like running back and think you're going to beat everyone else because, I don't know, you're just smarter than 300,000 others. It doesn't work like that. So, yeah, I try my best to kind of leverage that situation as much as I
can. No, I agree. And the thing with Dalvin Cook is, they have weapons. They have two great wide receiver weapons. It's not like they don't have a passing game. Right. So easily the flow of the game could take the ball away from Cook. And in this instance, we could see a heavy passing shootout. And so it's just, a lot of people, they just focus on, like you said, that 80-yard run. Oh, he's going to be incredible. Atlanta's defense is not necessarily the greatest. But that's not what you should focus on. You should focus on what's going to be the most optimal play for you in your lineups, especially when building them in Fantasy Cruncher. You guys, what was that?
I totally agree, and it's people just have to really dig down. It's gonna sound bad because you're gonna be without Dalvin Cook sometimes, but don't feel bad. It's DFS. It's a zero-sum game. At least we like to think it is. And if people are going one way, go the other way. Don't feel bad about it. Don't feel bad about it.
You guys, we have Manny Laura here. We're at middle part of the hour right now. Before we go into the main slate, you guys, if you don't have Fantasy Cruncher, if you're wanting to kind of have this tool and use it for week one, use the sign-up code NFL Strategy, get 50% off your first month of Osmo Plus. All you got to do is just go to osmo.com/join and check out our new landing page with videos. They describe each package so you know what you're actually getting before you buy it. Get access to all the tools developed by the number one player in the world himself, Alex Baker, Osmo. And you guys go ahead and check that out. That's osmo.com/join. Manny, let's get into this slate real quick.
Let's do it.
It's going to be interesting. I'm going to just break down game by game. We'll go over just some key bullet points and talk about each matchup. Let's start with the Titans and the Browns. Honestly, I'm all about the Browns right now. I'm on the hype train. So, how do you feel about this matchup?
I feel like you're one that would already have a Browns jersey somewhere in your closet. That's the feeling I'm getting.
Oh man,
it's like the Titans are just a really bad team, right? Mariota looked horrible in preseason. Might even lose his job to Tannehill. That's horrible. That's horrendous. I think to me, it's one of those where And by the way, if you wanted to pivot off of Dalvin Cook, I think Nick Chubb might be an okay. I mean, I think he still has ownership, but Nick Chubb at that price tag, I think, is still pretty cool. I think they win this game outright. Like, it's not even close, in my opinion. I think one of Jarvis, Odell get their share. I can't pinpoint who it is. Both are great players. But I love this team all around. I think as favorites, I think they just go in and at home they make a statement win to start the season. That's how I'm thinking of it. I have a hard time kind of game stacking. And for the record, when I'm going to talk about these games, all these games for me are game stacks, right? I try to get as many players from the same game as I can. If one shoots out, that's how I get my edge in tournaments, right? So for me, it's a really tough one to game stack. You can't game stack starting from one side because their quarterback's horrible. So you're only going to do what? Baker Mayfield to one of Chubb, Jarvis Landry, and Odell. I still think there isn't enough firepower coming back to make the game stack worth. So it's a game that I like individual players in, but it's really hard for me to have, a combination of players in across my lineups. Maybe some Baker Mayfield stacks. Outside of that, it's just going to be a lot of Nick Chubb. I think the running game is going to prevail.
45.5 total, not necessarily too bad. A place that I'm kind of looking at right now for the Browns is David Njoku, tight end. Tennessee last year was one of the worst teams defending the tight end and gave up, I think, third most fantasy points to the tight end position. But I do like pivoting to the Baker Njoku stack correlation. Njoku's fairly cheap, so he gives you kind of that roster construction freedom. But I like the tight end on the other side, Delaney Walker.
Yeah, I think tight ends here are interesting because they're obviously now your household names. They aren't going to be your Kelseys, your Ertz, or whatever, but they are guys that I think are in pretty decent spots. The only thing I hate about the Browns is they have way too many weapons. And in an easy matchup, I've heard already, dude, Odell's going to have a big week 1, regardless of how he feels. Nick Chubb is going to be insane. Baker Mayfield, if you stack them both, is going to be unbelievable. And Njoku as my favorite tight end. Dude, we might as well roster the Browns defense and the kicker too, right? Just the whole team. And they're going to score 100 on Sunday. It's one of them's inevitably going to fail. I'd like to bet a little bit on Njoku as well. I have him right now as my 4th tight end on the board. But I do have a significant amount of him. So I think I'm with you. If it's not Chubb, I hope, a random touchdown from Njoku is the way it goes down. But I think you're totally right. As of right now, I have no Delaney. Again, I hate that team, honestly. I cannot stand Tennessee. I think they're just awful. I think he has a bounce back year. I just don't know if this is the day for him. But yeah, tight ends I think are in play this week.
And probably a game going to where we might not have a lot of plays is your team down in Miami, the Dolphins, hosting the Ravens. 38.5 over under, the lowest on the slate. Talk to me about this matchup because honestly, I don't have much to say.
No, I mean, it's going to be run, punt for the Dolphins. Run, touchdown for Baltimore. It's for fantasy, this is ugly, man. You look at the total, and I don't think I have a single player from this entire game. I'm being honest. I don't have not even the defense, not even Baltimore. I don't have anything. Dolphins defense, Baltimore defense, Ingram, Lamar Jackson, nobody. I have nothing. I can't even tell you a single thing about this game. I have nothing.
Watch this game be the shootout. The game that breaks the slate. Balaj just has 3 touchdowns, 100 yards. Ingram goes off. I mean, I hope not, but.
I hope
I might have to have like 2%.
I honestly don't even think that's in their wheelhouse. That's so far beyond what they can actually do. No, I don't think so.
Kenyon Drake, 80-yard run, first play of the game. Watch. All right, Falcons and Vikings. We talked about Dalvin Cook a little bit. 47.5 over under. A lot of people seem to be going to this game. Julio Jones, highly projected to be one of the highest owned wideouts, and he's the most expensive wideout. Let's talk about this game, man. We obviously broke down Dalvin Cook. Where are you at on the Falcons side and other weapons of the Vikings offense?
Yeah, so on the Falcons side, I think it's interesting because I think they fall behind just a little bit. If you're taking Vegas for what it is, they have Minnesota as favorites. And I think rightfully so. I think at home they should win this game. But if it does happen that way, a couple things. So the game and how I try to do it is try to play out the game, right? There are a couple scenarios that can play out that are a little more likely than others, right? If Minnesota's winning by a touchdown, maybe 10 points, then, Atlanta will have to pass. In that sense, I think Julio and Calvin Ridley make a lot of sense, right? I think for the most part, they have tough matchups for most of the game. So it's hard for me to go to a Matt Ryan with Julio stack or Matt Ryan with Calvin Ridley stack. So that's not on the board for me this week. But running back some of those Minnesota stacks with Julio or with Calvin Ridley, to me, make a ton of sense. What do you do on the Minnesota side? Is it Dalvin Cook as your main guy? Or is it Cousins to Diggs and Thielen that you want to start off with and then run it back with one of Julio and Calvin Ridley? I think that's the way to go. At least that's what I'm doing. I'm using Dalvin as not as little as I can, but really by himself. I hate including him with those guys because I think a running touchdown from Dalvin almost kills your Diggs Thielen stacks, right? Unless they score a ton, which is definitely possible, but I'd like to bet that doesn't happen. So it's one or the other for me in Minnesota. I think one of Julio and Ridley is the way to go in Atlanta.
Yeah, I wrote up yesterday the Julio Jones matchup. I mean, he's going to be covered by Xavier Rhodes. He's a top 10 corner. The thing is that he's hurt, and he also has the mindset of the contract dispute right now. Right. So I just feel like there's a lot of things going on, and him being that highly owned makes me really happy to kind of avoid him simply because people are paying a lot for a wideout. There's a lot of value at wideout this week, especially in week 1. So that's an interesting take right there as far as the ownership on Julio Jones at this moment. However, though, the Vikings, I mean, Atlanta, they were the 3rd worst last year in covering wideouts, and they gave up the 3rd most fantasy points as well. Yep. I really like Diggs, and I really like Thielen this week. I think the game plan, if they're shutting down Cook, I think Thielen and Diggs are going to eat. I think Cousins is going to have a great game. I think he's in his 2nd year now. He's more comfortable. I'm really liking this matchup. So I could see myself really having some great exposure to Cousins in the 2 wideouts this weekend.
Yeah, for me, just giving you an idea of where I am on Diggs and Thielen, both are in my top 5 receivers this week as it stands right now. So I think we're both on the same page.
So speaking of receivers, I like a couple wide receivers in this next matchup. Bills and the Jets. I know the over-under is not necessarily appetizing at 41. Jets a 3-point favorite at home. Go ahead first because I got some little plays here for the Bills. But what do you think about this game?
From the Bills?
From the Bills.
What? How on earth?
Yeah.
I have nothing. I do not have a single Darnold share. I don't have any running backs from the Jets. Receivers, I don't think they're making the cut. It's one of those AFC division matchups to where I'm just like, man, I hate these games. I play these teams. Well, Miami plays these teams twice every year, and they're the most boringest games to watch. And when someone scores, it feels like it's an undrafted walk-on that somehow sneaks into the end. Like, I don't know. I can't predict this at all. And if you have Bills exposure, please enlighten me, dude. I have not a single player from this game.
Man, so I'm a Jets fan. Sure. I spoke that earlier in the show, diehard Jets fan. The thing is, the Jets, they don't have any good cornerbacks. I'm just going to throw that out there. Right. They struggle in the passing game severely. Their front 4 is great on defense, but when you get back and peel those layers outside of Adams at the safety position, they just can't guard the outside, and they struggle with slot receivers. Last year, they gave up the most yardage per game to the slot receiver, and I really like Cole Beasley. Minimum price.
Wow.
I feel like this is one of those plays where you're looking for one of those cheap wideouts that could win the Millie Maker. I feel like that's that type of play. And I also like Zay Jones. I feel like last year there were a couple times where the Zay Jones, Josh Allen correlation won the Millie. I think it was like twice we saw that. I could see that happening this weekend as well. Not necessarily both of them are projected to be highly owned. I think they're 2 or 3%. But they bring upside and they give you that roster space to maybe get like a Saquon Barkley or like a Zeke and just give you that little cap space flexibility. So I'm on those 2. I'm going to be over the field, obviously, but I just feel like they're in good positions. And I feel like maybe with now McCoy gone, I feel like they have a good understanding of how they're going to run this offense.
Yeah, so it's more, your Jets suck and you're going to target against your Jets. I like this.
Yeah, if they win, then I win. It's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Allen to Zay Jones doesn't seem appealing at all. But listen, if you're going to be one of the few on that stack and it happens to go off, like Zay Jones catches one of those 50-yarders, I mean, you're golden, dude. There's not a single person holding your hand with that stack, and I respect it. All right, I probably won't do it, but I respect it. That's
it's just one of those lineups that could potentially
for sure,
win
man.
the Millie Maker.
Listen, go big or go home, right? Go big or go home. $1 million is a lot. We spoke about it pre-show, dude.
The Millie might be won by someone in this next game, actually, because there are a lot of people speaking highly of Carson Wentz. He's at home this week against the Redskins. There's a lot of talk that he's going to just Are you on Carson Wentz? What's going on this week with this game for you?
Carson Wentz, you sound like Laffy, dude. Every time he gets to a Philly guy, he loves Philly guys for whatever reason, even if they're in the worst matchups. Sure, but like they should have a really easy time winning this game, right? 10-point favorites against Washington, and they're at home. I mean, I feel like they could score any way possible. Whether it's, I wouldn't even be surprised if it's like and not even Miles Sanders punching it in. It could be anyone getting these touchdowns. I think they win. When I have a hard time projecting a game, it's really tough for me. Outside of Zach Ertz, I don't know what else I'd like in this game. Like I know the whole Jeffrey thing is concerning for some. I don't even think they need him to win this game. Washington's that bad. And if they do get up a little bit, which they should be, I think it's going to be a lot of, just the Eagles running the football, playing good defense, the line dominating. And if that's the case, man, I probably have no interest in this game. If I game stack a lot, and I do, where am I going to go from the Washington side to make this a close game? It just doesn't even make sense. That team is awful. Maybe Geist does something, but even then, if they're down, I can't imagine he'd do enough. This is a bad game. Should be an Eagles onslaught, but I can't predict where it's coming from, so I'm staying away.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the Eagles running back by committee is just too large, and there's really not an understanding of who's going to get the most workload. Right. I mean, maybe Jordan Howard gets a couple goal line touches, but outside of that, I mean, I really just don't see any value in rostering this game, especially if it's going to be a blowout. So I'm with you on the same page. And Redskins, there's really nothing there that gets me excited. The next game, though, is a little bit more exciting because this seems to be one of those chalk game stacks, the Rams and the Panthers. Over under 50. Rams are favored right now by 2 points at Carolina. Let's talk here. Are we game stacking this?
Yeah, I think you have to, right? I mean, this is the one with all the weapons, but the way in which you stack this game, I think, is what's going to make people different. So I think it's unique because both teams have enough players where they can do this, right? Cam, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, McCaffrey, Olsen, whoever you want. And then on the other side, all the receivers and Gurley, right? So how you want to do this is what's going to make you different. I have a bunch of Cam. Well, okay, so this is how it'll work. Again, I'm just trying to help the viewers out. Again, you sent blind, just regular stack rules, you're going to get a lot of Cam, and that's because you're getting a lot of Samuel, right? I think Samuel's where this game pops up in optimizers. He's 4,200 compared to DJ Moore, who's 55. But the 4,200 price tag gives an optimizer a way to still have stacks. It's cheap enough and still get good guys as fillers or good players as fillers to where you can have highly projected lineups, meaning if there's more Samuel, there's going to be more Cam, there's going to be more DJ Moore, more McCaffrey, more. So if you want to exclude Samuel and see how that works out to get a true idea of what you think of the Carolina team, I think that'll be a good way to gauge how much you want of Carolina. And then on the other side, it's Goff, but who do you have from this trio? Because you can have anyone: Woods, Cooks, Kupp, Gurley. I mean, it's take your pick. I'd go with two of those guys on either side. I just think I'm going to be a little bit under the field on Curtis Samuel, who I think is a little bit more popular than he should be, in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but the talent's there with Curtis Samuel.
The talent's there for sure.
And his price point is fairly affordable. So I think people are also focusing on the price for his ownership, which is going to draw a lot. I mean, he's projected right now 24% owned. Probably is going to be a little higher come the weekend. I do believe he is the best wide receiver on the team. However, though, I think a great pivot play would be more this weekend, and especially in a game stack correlation, you go to the opposite side. So yeah, I mean, the Rams, though, a lot of targets. I think Brandon Cooks is the highest projected wide receiver owned right now at 8%. So I mean, even being a little bit over the field on the Rams might not be a bad thing, but this will be a game stack that a lot of people will be going to. But yeah, Curtis Samuel, that's the that's going to be the play of the week, where he's either going to break the slate or people are just going to be pivoting.
That's the salary play. That's the optimizer breaker. He's the one that's going to make and break your lineups. I totally agree, but it's because of $4,200 price tag. So careful how you handle Samuel. I love the guy. Great talent. I agree. Great team. And great price. It's just, I want to win tournaments. I really don't care about him as a player, right? I want to win tournaments.
Absolutely.
So I'll do my best to get up there, and Samuel's a huge part of that.
Jaguars Chiefs 51.5 over under. Kansas City 3.5 point favorite going into Jackson. Ownership too right now on Osmos projections, updated 20% owned. He is the fourth highest owned back for Sunday. How do you feel about this game? Is this another game where we stack?
You can stack. The problem is it's so darn expensive that how do you stack this game, right? Like if you want Mahomes, right, you want Tyreek, you want Travis Kelce, that's like what, 2,200? I mean, 22,000. Like that's, I mean, it's so, each one is over 7K, and paying over 7K for a quarterback, I wouldn't say is a big no, but it puts you in a hole big time, right? To where you're struggling to get any sort of value in your lineups just to make it work. So I like to tell people this. It's, this is a great team, great players, great game. The problem is I'm trying to make my best version of these 10 players, right? Or 9 players or whatever it is. I want to get my best DK lineup, Yahoo lineup, fantasy draft, Fanduel, whatever you want. It's a collection of players, right? Not just how much is Pat Mahomes and Tyreek Hill going to score together, and then I'll fill in the rest. The rest could give you zeros for all you know. So I want to make the best possible lineup. It's very hard to make good lineups using Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelce. Maybe if you use one of Tyreek and Kelce, you can make it work. But again, going into those, you're going to almost 100%. You're going to play Curtis Samuel. You're going to be into D.D. Westbrook territory. Maybe Hunter Henry at tight end. You're going to get into plays that where if you play them all together, I mean, good luck. I don't like sweating any of those guys, especially when they're all together in my lineup. So, and then if you wanted to run back some of these Kansas City stacks, Fournette or Dede, where else do you go? I mean, it's very hard to be different in KC game stacks too. So I don't know. I like this game projection wise, but what it does to my lineups is a big no for me. So I don't know. I'm on the fence. I don't think I'm going to have much of this game, to be honest.
D.D. Westbrook, a lot of talk the last week and a half because you went off in, I think, week 3 of the preseason, got a ton of targets. Nick Foles and him seem to have a nice connection, drawing a lot of ownership now, and it's increasing by the day. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be a sneaky play anymore. It's looking more like chalk. So yeah, this game, it's like you said, you can't have a lineup with all chalk. You're probably not going to end up taking down the milli makers. So just be aware of that when it comes to stacking and when it comes to player correlations.
Yep.
Colts Chargers next game. Now we go into the 4 o'clock games on the East Coast. We got the line at 6.5 right now for the Chargers, 44.5 over under. Let's talk about this game real quick. Do you have anyone from this game?
Yeah, actually pretty easy to game stack if you ask me, right? I think the Chargers win fairly. I wouldn't say fairly easily, but I think they do win. You can run it back pretty simple with 2 guys on the other side if you wanted to do, T.Y., Mac, whoever. I think you can do that. And then Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry. If you wanted to do Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, by the way, a great pass catcher too. I don't have any issues pairing him with Phillip Rivers. It all makes sense, right? Hunter Henry, fairly cheap if you wanted a tight end spot. Austin Eckler at 5.5. I heard he's overpriced, overhyped, whatever. It makes sense with Phillip Rivers. And then you have a solid number 1 at 7.3 with Keenan Allen if you're playing DK. Depending where you're playing, it doesn't even matter where you're playing. I think it's all fairly simple to get in together. And then if you wanted to run it back with someone, I gave those options as well too. So I like the price for Rivers. I like this offense. I like the game total. I like everything. There's nothing to dislike about this game. I feel like people just get enamored with their guys, no matter what, that they just forget to look at every game equally. I think this game has some goodness and people aren't looking at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing with Eckler though is he does bought a good matchup. Colts struggle heavily with pass catching backs, and I mean that's Eckler's specialty. So I mean I understand, and the price point is more than reasonable. However, though, what about the flip side? Any Justin Jackson?
I think if you wanted to run Justin Jackson by himself, look, I think it's a stretch. I'm not going to be going there. I think I just rather pay. Listen, if you fail at running back or receiver, it's so detrimental, right? So taking a stand on using someone like that is I think a little bit too risky for me. If I can get down to the guys at 5K and probably not get under that, I'd feel okay. If I have to drop a little bit further just to get salary relief, that's when I start getting uncomfortable. So for me, it's a no until I see it play out. I think I'm okay with Eckler. Outside of that, Justin Jackson, I think, is a reach for me.
Okay. We only got a couple more minutes, guys. So if you can, start putting in your questions in the chat. We'll go over these last couple games real quick. Bengals, Seahawks. Manny, how you feeling about Chris Carson?
Good play, I think, by himself, right? I don't think you pair him with anyone. I don't think you really game stack this game at all. Chris Carson by himself, I mean, looks like he's going to be the lead guy again, right? Even though they, quote unquote, said the whole hot hand thing or whatever, but he seems to be the better runner for me. I think we saw that since last season. I like how this game projects. I like that they're at home. I like that they're heavy favorites. All the boxes are checked for Chris Carson. So yeah, and the price tag, extremely affordable, at least compared to what his projection looks like for me. So yeah, Chris Carson, probably my favorite play, probably the only play I have from this game.
Yeah, weather's going to be not so great too. Could be the high 60s with a lot of rain. So maybe a lot of ground and pound action up there in Seattle. Giants, Cowboys, Zeke Elliott, he's signed. He's there. He'll be playing. Are we rolling with Zeke?
I think you can. I think it's just hard to fit in Zeke, right? I think I maybe like Saquon a little more. Either way, Zeke is probably the only guy you get from this game. As heavy favorites, you like that he's going to run a ton at home, yada yada, against the Giants. I love this. I don't know how I game stack this because I really don't like the passing game from the Cowboys. But if you could maybe run Ingram on the other side, maybe Sterling Shepard, I think you could have something. But individual plays from this game for me, Zeke is okay. I think the Giants trying to catch up, probably better plays in PPR sites for me.
No, absolutely, I agree. Lions, Cardinals, 46.5. Detroit coming in as a 2.5-point favorite on the road in Arizona. There's been a lot of talk this week about not necessarily going to the running game as far as rostering with Kerryon Johnson and maybe focusing more on Matt Stafford in the passing game. I don't necessarily know if that's the right approach. I do like David Johnson. How do we feel about this game?
Yeah, DJ Fitz, I think, are pretty good pairings with Kyler if you wanted to go there. I think Kyler's cheap enough where if you want this game, you think they trail. I actually think that helps Kyler in the passing game. So I don't mind those two guys. I'm on the fence about Christian Kirk. I've heard all the hype. I know he's going to be the number 2 there, but until I see it play out, until I see realistically what his upside can be in some of these matchups, I don't know how much of Kirk I want. But I will have some combination of Kyler to DJ, Fitz, or Kirk. And I think I want to lean to Fitz, DJ a little more. Kerryon's probably the only guy on the other side I trust. Outside of that, I like a Galladay. I think is okay. I've even heard Marvin Jones because of his price tag, but
yeah,
I'm okay. I think just the Arizona side, and that's that I think they lose. So,
and then we have the final game, which is going to be the game that's going to probably win someone the Millie Maker because there's a lot of plays here that people are liking. 49ers, Bucks. Expected shootout, close matchup, 1.5-point favorite for the Bucks, over under 51. I know you're going to this game. I know you're going with that Winston Godwin correlation.
Am I? How sure are you? How sure are you that I'm going?
I don't know, man. I feel like I have a hunch right now.
Maybe over time, we'll get to know each other a little more. If you know me, I'm only tournament player. I only go to win. That means if everyone's going to this game, as of right now, I have 0 Winston. I have 0 Godwin. I have very little Mike Evans. And I feel okay. I don't think this is a horribly projected offense. This offense projects to be great. The team total is great. The game total is awesome. The spread is incredible. Should be a close game. I just, if that's where everyone's going, there are 11 other games I can choose from. So I'll pick and choose my spots in this game. I think Evans is where I want, but the whole Godwin thing, Winston thing, I don't know. People are enamored with a last place team right now, and I'm just not cool with that. I don't roll with that.
Believe it or not, their ownership has dropped. Over the last couple of days, Winston's projected to be 7% owned.
Yeah.
With the new
that sounds correct. That sounds about right.
Yeah,
the field is getting smaller.
Yeah, it's getting a lot smarter because it was up there by 20%. So we're seeing it come down. We're seeing Godwin come down. He's now at 12%. I think he was at 19, 20% previously. So clearly people are now looking at other matchups, which that kind of gauges my interest a little more. If ownership's coming down, maybe that's an area that I do want to attack. You guys, we have a couple minutes left. I didn't really see too many questions here in the chat. Not really anything, just not there. I think what we can do now, Manny, is let's close this out. Manny, thank you for today, man. It was our first show together. I actually liked it. It was a really good time, man. Really love your knowledge and expertise with Fantasy Cruncher. Definitely love watching your shows. Manny, where can we find you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so everything I do or come out with will be on fantasycruncher.com. I am Team FC, right? So everything I do will be coming out there. If you want to watch any of my videos that I've done previously, will be hosted all there. If you want to catch my live shows, my live streams, it's twitch.tv/mlora. And I have a podcast that comes out every weekday called The Study Minute. You can find that on any major platform. So other than that, nothing. Just FC for me, and hopefully working a little bit closer with you guys. I also do the Awesemo radio show with Laffy on Saturdays and Sundays. We will be doing Sunday Night Football, I think, this year for SiriusXM. So that should be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, love that show. You guys definitely have a great show on the weekend. You guys make sure to check Manny out. You guys can catch me, Chris Randone, on Twitter. Check out my articles and videos on awesemo.com. Me and Manny will be back next Friday, same time. Get some questions for next time. Until then, guys, this was a pleasure. Manny, I'll see you at the top of the leaderboard in the Millie Maker on Sunday.
Take care, man.